Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the new and revamped Salebox for the 4th of March 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit, with 10 good picks from the Steam sales, which are now constant and forever. It is now possible for you to put your game on sale whenever you want without Valve actually having to be involved in any way. This means that there are now constantly over 100 games on sale most of the time. So, I'm doing my best to pick through them and providing you with 10 that do not suck. I've also organized them into a chart format for two reasons. One, charts are fun. Two, charts make people upset, which is fun for me. So, let's begin, shall we, with number 10, the Showdown Effect, 75% off. Now, I actually like this game a lot, and I would have put it higher on the list. The problem is that it's not really supported anymore, and the player base is not that big. It's certainly big enough to find a game, and I think that this sale will help it greatly, but the game hasn't actually been updated for 9 months now. It works, yes, and for the most part, it's fine. You have to be a little bit careful about which server you join, unfortunately. Since there are definitely some netcode issues, lag compensation in this game is not that great, so making sure that you join a server with a good ping is pretty important. What is it? Well, it's a 2D stylized multiplayer deathmatch. It's inspired by action movies, so it actually reminds me of a 2D version of Action Quake or Action Half-Life, or maybe the Specialists mod, which perhaps you also remember. It involves a lot of diving, a lot of shooting backwards, a lot of dual wielding, and a little bit of melee combat, and overall I find the combat system to be very enjoyable, hyper-stylized, and there's a lot of fun involved, particularly with the platforming system, which involves things like wall running, slides, and all sorts of other great stuff. I think the skill ceiling is fairly high, and there's a decent variety in the weapons you can use. The problem is, as I said, it never really got much support beyond a couple of updates and a little bit of cosmetic content, which is a shame. I think Arrowhead moved on to working on Magica Wizard Wars, and kind of left this one behind, but it's still perfectly playable. It doesn't have a single-player mode, though, so bear that in mind. You're getting this for multiplayer only, but for a couple of dollars, I certainly think it's worth a few hours of multiplayer time, and if you've got a few friends to play it with, it's even better. Number 9, Receiver, 66% off. The reason this isn't higher on the list is that it's a very, very focused game concept, by which I mean there isn't much of a game there. What there is, however, is very interesting, and I would find it very difficult to recommend Receiver at full price. However, for the price of a Coke and a packet of crisps, that's a little bit of an easier sell. The point of Receiver is that you are spawned in a randomly generated world with a gun, and you have to survive and find various audio logs. The thing about it is the control of the gun is the focus of the game. This game was actually created as part of a game jam, and there are rather complex mechanics involving the operation of the gun, and this involves things like manually reloading, counting the number of bullets you have by taking the magazine out of the gun, very precise recoil mechanics and things like that. It also has a bit of a roguelite feel to it in the sense that the levels are procedurally generated and the enemies will pretty much kill you in one hit, so you've got to be very careful. It's good for an hour or two of exploration, is what I'd say with that, and it's a really interesting concept, and if you happen to be rather interested in the idea of a more realistic bit of gunplay, then Receiver has you covered there. Story's not too bad either. Number 8, Alice the Madness Returns, 75% off. This is a bit of a third-person character action game set in a weird and warped version of the Wonderland story. There's no real doubt that the biggest strength of this game is its aesthetic and its theme. It's a very, very twisted version of the fairy tale, and the interpretation of it is, in my opinion, extremely enjoyable. Game certainly starts off a little bit slow and linear, but it definitely gets going. It's got plenty of puzzles, platforming, and, of course, manic action in a twisted fairy tale world. The main reason this one isn't higher on the list is because the PC version is not amazing. In fact, it was locked to 30 FPS, although it is possible to unlock it. I would suggest that you head over to PCGamingWiki.com, because there's a lot of instructions there. The game suffers from negative mouse acceleration, and it doesn't have proper controller remapping, which is why at full price I'd never possibly recommend it. However, at a heavily discounted price, yeah, absolutely, if you can deal with that stuff. As I said, it is possible to fix a lot of this, and if you head over to PCGamingWiki.com, you will find the instructions for doing so. At number 7, we've got the Frozenbyte Collection, 85% off. In the previous episode, I mentioned Trine. This time around, I'm going to mention just the whole bundle, which is both Trine games and both Shadowgrounds games. Shadowgrounds doesn't get talked about a huge amount because it's considered to be a lesser game than Trine, and I don't blame people for that. It's an extremely dumb but pretty enjoyable isometric style shoot-'em-up, which involves you as a character with a bunch of futuristic guns blowing up a lot of nasty alien critters. The story is basically non-existent, the voice acting is absolutely awful, but the action itself and the combat, in my opinion, is very enjoyable. I do like games like that, particularly things like Nation Red, which I keep revisiting every now and again because it is that much fun to play. If you like doing nothing more than blowing away aliens, then this is a good game to do it in. Shadowground Survivor had 3 different classes as well as a better RPG-like upgrade system and things like that. But in my opinion, it's worth blasting through both of them. If you already have Trine, of course, then you can pick both of these games up at 90% off each as well, so feel free to pick and choose. But the Frozenbyte Collection is pretty good value with 2 exceptional titles in the form of Trine and Trine 2, and 2 fairly enjoyable titles in the form of Shadowgrounds and Shadowground Survivor. Number 6, Bad Company 2, 75% off. Probably my favorite Battlefield game outside of Battlefield 2, honestly. I still have very fond memories of Bad Company 2, and I don't think the games that have come out since then have actually been up to that kind of standard. And at 75% off, it is worth having. There is still a player base for this game, and you can also pick up the Vietnam expansion, which is well worth having. The level of environmental destruction you can do in Bad Company 2 exceeds anything that you've been able to do since then, including Battlefield 4, even though it has that whole levolution thing. In Bad Company 2, you can just level buildings, almost all of them, leaving nothing but the frame, and that means a lot of the levels get pretty flat after a while, but honestly, I think Bad Company 2 is a hell of a lot of fun. The single-player campaign isn't awful either. It's not as good as the original Bad Company, which is why I was a little bit disappointed that that never made its way to PC. The sense of humor for Bad Company 1 was awesome. It's not entirely there in Bad Company 2, unfortunately, but it's still worth a little bit of a play through the single player. It's less linear than the campaigns that have come after it, and it's got a lot more environmental destruction. If you can't be bothered with the nonsense that surrounds Battlefield 4, and I certainly don't blame you right now, then Bad Company 2 is still very playable and still has a player base. Also, they didn't try and sell you map packs, so that's a plus. Coming in at number 5, we got Sacrifice, 66% off. I'd probably put this one at number 1 if I didn't know that it has been slightly cheaper prior to that, and of course if it was on GOG, but it's not, it's on Steam. Sacrifice is one of my favorite PC games of all time, and in my opinion, it was criminally underrated back then, and it's an absolute shame that we never got a proper sequel to it. In fact, the closest thing we ever got, really, was Brutal Legend. This is a third-person, real-time strategy RPG hybrid. At the time, it was very difficult to actually describe, but for the most part, you can look at it now and say, huh, alright, hotkey-based spells, that's actually a little bit like an MMO. Kind of is to some degree, but you are able to control large numbers of creatures which you can summon from the ground, and you can also create structures on the map. The storyline is excellent. It is not what I'd call truly non-linear, but it's got a ton of branching paths. It's got about 50 missions in it. You only ever really play 10 of them, considering you can switch between gods and allegiances, all of which have different missions associated with them. So the replayability is massive. The multiplayer is a hell of a lot of fun, but good luck finding anybody to play it with. But it's a game that stands the test of time. Its warped graphics style still suits the game and looks great, and the voice acting is just absolutely fantastic. I mean, this was Shiny's proudest moment. No real doubt about that. Although, bear in mind, since it's quite an old game, you will probably have widescreen issues. Head over to PCGamingWiki.com. There is plenty of information as to how to make that work properly. Number 4, Rock of Ages, 80% off. This is a silly, silly game. It's a mixture of tower defense and bowling. You hide in a castle, so does an important historical figure, animated and drawn in the style of a cardboard cutout. Very Monty Python-esque, to say the least. You have to bowl your large rock through a course, which involves avoiding a bunch of obstacles and defenses built by your opponent, smash down the doors of the castle, and flatten him, and change history forever. It's silly. Really silly, but a hell of a lot of fun. It's worth it for the aesthetic alone, which is extremely funny, but also very creative. In fact, the whole game is very creative. It's a bit difficult to recommend at full price, but at 80% off, this is an absolute no-brainer, in my honest opinion, so by all means, do check out Rock of Ages. Bowling doesn't sound all that enjoyable, but trust me, it is. It's a very, very tense game indeed, and you'll find yourself screaming to high heavens as you end up getting knocked off the course. Yeah, try it, seriously. Number 3, Waking Mars, 80% off. This was a game that, at the time, I appreciated for its atmosphere and its aesthetic, but I wasn't really big on the gameplay. Thing is, that was my personal issue. I'm just not a huge fan of those games. This game received large amounts of acclaim, and rightfully so. Waking Mars is an excellent sci-fi adventure. The main problem that I had at the time was the title was a little bit pricey in comparison to its iOS and Android counterparts. On sale, again, a lot easier to recommend. If you like the kind of Metroidvania style of doing things, then Waking Mars might be right up your alley. It's certainly less combat-focused than you might expect, and in fact, there's a lot of environmental puzzles involving the interaction of various species in this big ecosystem, which is rather original, to say the least. The story's great. It's fantastically atmospheric. It is a really good sci-fi game, and I would recommend it, and hopefully the guys over at Tiger Style are able to make another game that is equally creative. Number 2, Burnout Paradise Ultimate Box, 75% off. You might notice there's a bunch of EA games on sale this week. That is very true. Most of them, unfortunately, are Need for Speed games. A lot of the ports are really bad. Otherwise, I'd said, hey, get Hot Pursuit instead of this. The problem with Hot Pursuit is it's locked at 30 FPS and it's a terrible port. This, on the other hand, Burnout Paradise, is actually a very good port and is absolutely worth it. I don't know that many people that don't already have Burnout Paradise at this point because it has been on sale a lot, but I would be amiss to ignore the fact that it is the cost of a foot-long Subway sandwich. As I said, the PC port is pretty good, although everything's done in external launcher, which can be annoying for some people. Do bear in mind that the DLC for this is now inaccessible via legal means. There are some instructions on PCGamingWiki.com, including an advanced configuration tool that should make things a little bit easier for you. The game itself, though, is a really enjoyable open-world racer, and it's certainly the arcade style as opposed to simulation. So if you're not a huge racing fan, Burnout's one of those games that you can just play anyway, smash up a bunch of cars and have a lot of fun. Huge amount of variety of vehicles available for you to drive around, and a really enjoyable open world to tear up. A lot of gameplay available here, and certainly one of the best arcade racing games on PC. And coming at number 1, we have Supreme Commander Gold, 75% off for Supreme Commander and Supreme Commander Forged Alliance. The reason that I recommend the Gold Edition is because while Supreme Commander Forged Alliance is a standalone title, if you try and play multiplayer with just Forged Alliance, you will most likely be locked to the Seraphim race only, which is not that great. Unless something has changed much further down the line, maybe with some kind of third-party patch. Yeah, you pretty much want both games so that you can unlock all the races in multiplayer. And multiplayer is still a thing, shockingly enough. There is a fairly fantastic site called faforever.com. That's forgedallianceforever.com, which is a community-driven lobby for Forged Alliance. And they are continuing to patch the game. The official matchmaking system and everything is dead. FA Forever, on the other hand, isn't, and actually has a solid community behind it. They even added in things like a co-op campaign, new game modes, 12-player support. I mean, it's just amazing what the community can do with stuff like this. And frankly, Forged Alliance is an amazing RTS. Really, really large scale, but fairly easy to control, which is an achievement in and of itself, and it's a real shame that the scale as well as the sublime nature of the economy was ruined with Supreme Commander 2, which I absolutely despised. Oh god, I hate that game so very much. And compared to Forged Alliance, it is not even close. It was one of the biggest disappointments that I ever suffered. When it came to the sequel of a game I really enjoyed, I think, honestly, only Invisible War tops that one. Oh, dear lord. Absolutely ridiculous. Massive scale futuristic battles, the spiritual successor to Total Annihilation, and a really fantastic community-driven lobby and active patching program. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Yeah. It's amazing. It really is. There's so much content to be had here, and to this day, I still love playing Supreme Commander. It's got to the point, I think, where I've got to polish up my multiplayer skills and try and get on this ladder. I have a feeling I'll get crushed, but hopefully if a bunch of you try it out as well, maybe I'll have a few more equally matched opponents. faforever.com, folks, is where you download Forged Alliance Forever, and of course, get the Supreme Commander Gold Edition on Steam right now for that big, big discount. Alright, folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the sale box. This will be coming whenever there's a bunch of new sales, basically. At the moment, that seems to be a couple of times a week, but things may slow down once the initial sale rush has subsided. I guess we will find out in the coming weeks. Thank you very much for watching, folks. Hopefully this was useful to you, and I'll see you next time.